Hey, Gabby, I thought this would help.
What's up, brother man?
I'm going to just
we're
go
going
over
to show you how to
these
complete
questions
the
in
square
case we don't
here.
get to some of them, or in case you want to take a
What
look at
we're
them
going to do is
again.
we're going to move the 11 to
A
the
lot
other
of my
side,
students,
so you're going to get
a lot of my students find that watching
x
the
squared
video is
minus
a little bit more helpful because they can
12x
stop it,
equals
rewind
negative
it.
11. Okay, let me see if I can pull that up.
So I post all my stuff on YouTube. So I thought maybe if I sent this to you, it'd help out a little bit. All right.
Okay.
Yes, darling.
Now, we're going to complete the square. What you're going to do, I don't know if you remember this.
Right.
This
Hold on 1 second, okay?
term right here.
All right,
is
so
x,
this
the
is
coefficient
when
of
rolling a
x.
fair six-sided
call it
number
b.
cube. That's just a die. All right.
You're going to take half of
What is the
b
probability of
and then
rolling an
square
even
it.
number or a number less than
All right,
3?
so half of
you said
12
you were pretty
would
good with
be,
the
I mean, half of
probability
negative 12 would be negative 6, but then if you
aspect
square
of
it, you're going to get a positive
I'll just
answer
go over this
anyways.
briefly
So
then.
you would get x squared minus
the
12x.
probability is going to be
half
the
of 12
total
is 6. 6 squared would give you 36.
is
So
going
you
to be
put
in the
plus
denominator,
36 right here.
and then in
And
the
if you
numerator,
add
you're going to
36
have
to the
what you're
left-hand
looking for.
side, so you're like literally just
I'm just
adding
right
something to the
looking.
left-hand side.
Right. So
Well, if you
it's
do that at the left-hand side, you got to do it
divided by the
side
total
as well.
Okay, like what you're looking for divided by the total
right.
number.
So
So
you get plus 36
on
to
a
both
die,
sides.
you have
So now what we're
6
left with,
numbers.
which number
And what is the probability of rolling
multiplies
an
together to give
even
you
number?
36, and you're
An
looking for the
even
same
is
number,
gonna
so
be
what
2, 4,
squared gives you
6, so that
36.
is 3 numbers.
And then
So you
added
have
together to gives you
a 3/6
negative
chance
12.
or 1/2 chance
You
of
would get
rolling
x
a even number
minus
and a number
6.
less than 3. That
X
would be
minus
2 or
6.
1. So we're going to add
And
these
if you were to
together.
do the FOIL,
Hold on,
you
baby.
get negative 12x plus 36.
We're gonna have,
all right.
2 or 1, so
and then
out of
negative
6,
11 plus
you
36
have
would give you 25.
a 2 or a 1, that's
Now,
2 of them.
this would give
However,
you
we need
x
to
minus
subtract
6 squared.
the 2, because
equals
like out of the
25.
numbers 1, 2, 3, all the
And
way through 6.
We're going to take the square root of both sides to get rid of that x
2 is
squared.
being
So
used
when you take the
twice,
square
like
root
you're
of
using,
x
like that's
squared,
the even
or x
number,
minus
so
6
you're already
squared,
taking that into consideration.
you're going to
for
get
3/6.
x minus 6
So we can't
equals
use
5.
This shouldn't even be
and
2
then-
6.
or
It
it's
should be 1
positive
6.
and
Or you
negative
could
5.
subtract
When you take
1
the square root,
6
you get a
because that
positive
is
and negative
subtracting
answer.
this 2 out of there because we're using it twice. So
You add 6 to
3
both
6
sides,
plus 2
and
6
you're
would
going
give
to
you
get
5
x
6, but then you have to
11,
subtract
or
that
x
1 6,
equals,
which would be the 2 that we're using
I'm sorry.
twice, and that would give you 4
you add
6.
6 to both sides.
2/3.
You're going to either get 11
So your answer there
or
would be
you're going
B.
to get
All right. Yeah.
negative
I love you,
6.
Okay. Question
me,
number
it's
2.
negative 11.
What is the probability of rolling a 5 on a
No,
fair
you're adding 6
six-sided
to both
number
sides,
cube?
you're
If
gonna
you
get
know
1.
the answer, if you know you're
If you
rolling
subtract
an
6
odd
from both sides,
number,
you're going
so
to get negative 11. Yeah.
there are only
So
3
your roots here are 1
odd numbers.
and negative 11.
We know that it's going to be odd. What's the probability
And
of rolling
when
a
we
5?
try that,
Well,
like if you
that's
were to plug
of the
1
3
and
options
negative
that you
11
have to
back
choose. So
in
a total of 3.
for
Rolling a 5,
x,
that's one
you should get
possibility, or
0.
like
So
that's
if I did 1
out of
squared,
the
that gives me
3
1.
different that you could get.
Negative
So your answer
12
would be
times
B.
1.
All right.
So that gives me 1 minus
All
12
right, let's get into
plus
the geometry.
11
Daddy,
should equal 0.
can I do one of those?
That give me negative 11
Yeah,
plus
sure.
11.
All right, I'm going to draw some numbers. You
So
gotta tell me
when I
what it is,
plug
all right?
these numbers back in for
Okay,
x,
so this one we are.
I
This
get
is a little
0.
bit of algebra
That's what I should
involved.
get. Okay,
We
the
want
next one,
the
I wanted to show you how to do one with a
circle to be in
coefficient.
the form x minus
We have a
h
coefficient
squared
here of negative 5. So
plus
we're going to move the
y
60
minus
to the other side.
k
So we're going to get negative
squared, and all of that is
5k
going to equal the radius
squared
So this is going to
minus
give you your
20k
order of pair. So the h and the k,
equals negative
that
60.
is your center.
So
in
we're going
the
to factor
R,
out this
that's gonna be
5.
your radius,
So we're going to
okay?
do negative
Daddy,
5.
to draw that.
And then we're going to have
All
k
right, so
squared.
what we're going to do is we are going to look
This
at,
would
we're
be
going to put this,
positive
let me zoom in
4k.
a little bit.
Equals negative 60.
No.
All right.
We are going to
Negative 5
look
times 4
at,
gives me negative 20. All right. So we're going to take half of 4, and then we're going to square it. So you're going to get negative 5. That's going to be k
this
squared
says
plus
8 equals
4k.
8 or 6. It looks like a 6.
Half
Okay.
of 4 is 2.
So we are
2
going
squared would
to-
give me 4. So you're going to say plus 4. Here's the kicker. If we add 4 to this side, we got to add 4 to this side, but you're adding 4, and you also have to multiply it by this negative 5 because we're
We are going to
distributing
put the 6
that.
on
So
the
we're
other
going
side.
to add
When you change the side, you
negative
change the sign.
20
What
to
we're gonna
both
do is we're going to
sides.
complete the square. We want to
See how we
factor
got
this
that?
'cause
Like,
we
see
want,
this negative 5? You have to distribute that
we
negative
want
4. So
when we say
we are
complete
adding
the square,
4,
we
but it's
want
not like we're
to
adding
get
4. It's like we're adding
factor
negative
it
20.
so we
You
have the
to multiply
same
by that
thing,
negative
and we're
5.
going to be multiplying it by
So you
itself,
get
which will be
negative
squared. So
5.
we're going to get the x,
And this
we're
would
going to
give
complete
you
the square, we're going to do the y, we're going to complete the square, and
numbers
that'll give us the
plus,
radius. So what we're going to have
the numbers
left
that
is it's
squared
going
to
to
give
say
you
x
4 would
squared
be k plus 2
minus
squared
6x, and then we're going
equals
to add y squared
negative 80. And
plus
now we're going
2y,
to solve for
and
k.
all that is going to equal negative 6. Because
I'm gonna
when
run
we
out of room
change
here.
the side, we're going to change
I would
the
divide
sign.
both
Now,
sides by negative 5.
how we factor this is we are going going to divide this number 6 by 2. So
plus
when we
2
complete the square, It's going to say
equals,
x squared minus
negative
6x. You're
divided
going to
by
divide
negative
the 6 by
positive
2 and then square it.
501
That's
to
going to give you
8.
your other number right here. So
Once
6 divided by 2, or negative 6 divided by 2 would give you negative 3, and then negative 3 squared would give you 9. So we're going to add 9 right here. But if we add 9 to one side, we got to add 9 to the other side. So this would be negative 6 plus 9.
6 times.
Okay,
So you
now
should
to
get
complete the
16
square
right there.
for
And when
y,
you take the square root of both sides.
you're going to have y squared plus 2y. When we divide 2 by 2, you get 1, and then 1 squared would give you 1. So we're going to add 1.
My bad.
So
we take the square root
this
of
is what
both
we have.
sides.
But if
you
we add
get
1 to this side,
k
we're going to add 1
plus
to
2
this side.
is
So we're going to add 1 to
equal
both sides.
positive and negative
Okay.
4. Oops.
Now,
So when you subtract 2 from both sides, you get
Which number
k equals
squared gives us 9.
4.
And when you add them
Positive
together,
4
they give
minus
you
2 would give you
6.
2,
Well,
and
if
k
we
would
did
also give you,
x minus
when you
3
subtract 2 from both sides,
times
you're
x
going to
minus
get negative
3,
4 minus 2, which would give you negative
or x
6.
minus 3
So
squared.
you get
Negative
2
3 times negative 3
6
gives you
right
positive
there.
9, and negative 3
All right.
plus
Holler at me if you have any
negative 3
questions. We'll
gives you
do
-6. So you
FaceTime
get
if you
x
still
minus 3
need,
squared.
or if you need anything, just
And-
let me know, brother. See ya.
Mm-hmm.
Guess what?
Yeah, babe.
PJ's chewing on trash and he's gonna get sick. He was chewing on it and then he got sick.
It's crazy. All right, so y squared plus 2y plus 1. 1 squared is going to give you 1, and then 1 plus 1 gives you 2, so you get y plus 1 squared. And we're going to simplify the right-hand side. That's going to give you negative 6 plus 9, which would give you 3, and then 3 plus 1 would give you 4. So if that's going too fast for you, we'll look at it a little bit more, or feel free to ask me questions on this. Now, this is the form that we wanted in. However, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. The form that we want it is going to be x minus h. Well, if it's given to you, the formula is x minus h, and our h is negative 3, it's going to be negative 3. So we're going to say x minus negative 3, which would give you a positive 3. So your ordered pair is going to be 3, and your k is positive, so it's just going to stay positive. You know, a positive and a positive would just stay positive. So you're going to get your center at 3, 1, and the r squared is 4. Remember, the formula says equals r squared. So if r squared is 4, which number squared gives you 4? Your r is going to be 2. So let's see what our best answer is. I mean, of course, they're all going to have 3s and 1s and 2s. The center being at 3, 1. Oh, this should be negative 1. We forgot to change the sign of it. Because k is minus k, so y plus 1, your 1, you put a 1 in there, it would be y minus 1, so your k would be negative 1. So your answer here would be C, because that would give you a radius of 2 and the center at 3, negative 1. All right. This is a proof question, the next one. Which one of these statements proves that this is a parallelogram? That's what this is asking us, all right? So, I already know the answer to this, so I'm going to go through the ones that it's not, and we're going to talk about why it's not. So I think that's just as important. The process of how we get our answer to these is more important than what the actual answer is, meaning, when you get on your test, you're going to know, you're going to come across something you don't know how to do, but if you know the process and how to get your answer, that's going to help you out more than just memorizing the formulas and that sort of stuff. If you memorize the logic, if you follow the logic, you should be good. All right, you'll be able to solve problems that you don't necessarily know the answer to. So which one of these statements is going to prove that ABCD is a parallelogram? Well, what we know about parallelograms is the opposite angles are congruent to one another. So DAB is going to be congruent to BCD. So that's what we know about a parallelogram. So what we're doing with proofs is we're saying if this, then this. We're going to use logic. So if this is a parallelogram, one of these things has got to be true, and we're going to assume that it is a parallelogram. So we're going to assume that all the properties of a parallelogram are going to go with this. So let's just look at D. It says diagonal BD is greater than diagonal AC. So we're saying BD is greater than AC. I don't remember ever hearing anything about a parallelogram if the one of the diagonals is greater than the other diagonal, that makes it a parallelogram. Like, so, let's kind of hold off on D. I don't really know about that. Like, I don't remember hearing anything about it. So let's just kind of hold off on it. Let's pick the best answer we can. C, it says diagonal BD and AC bisect one another. If they bisect, that means that they are going to be crossing at a right angle. So this would be a right angle and this would be a right angle. So if that is bisecting, you would have this angle is 90 and this angle is 90. So we're going to use our properties of triangles. If you can see the triangles here. Let's look at B and then this right angle and then C. Let's look at this triangle here. Well, if we want to prove this is a parallelogram, we know that this side and this side are going to be equal to one another. And if this is 90 degrees, this one is 90 degrees. So we know that AD and BC, if this is a parallelogram, those are going to be congruent to one another. Well, all we have is an angle and a side. Like, we don't know that angle ADB, we don't know that this angle is congruent to this angle. If we did, that would be a parallelogram, but we don't know that for sure. It doesn't tell us anything about it. We can't assume that those are congruent. So, it wouldn't be C. Let's look at B. It says side AB is equal to the diagonal AC. So if those are equal to one another, so let's look at this triangle here. This is saying AC is congruent to AB. Well, if that's true, this is what's called an isosceles triangle. That means that these two sides are congruent. That would mean that this angle is congruent to this angle. Already, I can tell you that's not true, because this angle here, angle ABC, this whole angle right here, it's got to equal this angle down here, ADC. So if these angles are going to be congruent to one another and angle ABC is congruent to angle BCA, those angles would add up to give you an angle, or those angles would add up to give you a triangle with more than 180 degrees, which is impossible. So this can't be an isosceles triangle, because the angles would be the same, and if the angles were the same, they would add up to something that's greater than 180. So let's look at A. So far the best answer we have is D, but let's look at A. It says diagonal BD, this guy here, bisects angle ABC. So if it bisects angle ABC, that means this angle is congruent to this angle. Well, let's take a look at this now. Let's look at this triangle. Where'd you go? Let's look at this guy. And we're going to look at the one on the opposite side, okay? We're going to look at triangle ABD. So I'm going to use just different colors here. So we're going to look at this guy here. Well, if this is a bisector, or I'm sorry, angle or diagonal BD bisects angle ABC. So that means that those two angles are congruent. So we know that this angle is congruent to this angle, right? We also, oh man, sorry. All right, my fault. So if those angles are congruent, right, and we know that angle DAB, if it is a parallelogram, this angle is going to be congruent to this angle. So we have, so far, angles that are congruent. We have this angle is congruent to this angle. We have this side is going to be congruent to this side. We have this angle is congruent to this angle. We have this side, which is congruent to this side, because if it is a parallelogram, those sides are going to be congruent to one another. So we've got angle, side, angle. That is definitely a proof. So we know that those angle or those triangles are congruent, and if they are congruent, that means that this is a parallelogram. So, I mean, the best answer here, since it is a parallelogram, that would mean this side is equal to this side. So the triangles are going to add up. You know, like the best answer here would be A, because if it is a bisector, that means that the angles are going to be congruent to one another, and the triangles would end up being congruent to one another, which is true for a parallelogram. All right, you have this angle, which is 90 degrees. I mean, all of the triangles that are made up in the inside of there are going to, they're going to be true. All right, excuse me. What happened? No. Here we go. All right, so let's move on here. All right, Gabby, if you don't mind, I'm going to skip this question here. This is just talking about area. If one of the areas is 5,000 and your yard is 500 square feet, you're only using 3/4 of the bag. You're going to multiply 3/4 times 500. That gives you like 325 or something like that. And you're going to see how many times that'll go into 5,000 to see how many bags of fertilizer you're going to have. Let's look at number 22. This is more geometry. All right. This is like the more logic that we're going to use. It says, so this is probability. It says a student draws a card from a standard deck and then I think it says does not replace it. So if you do not replace that card, they are not going to be mutually exclusive, which means when you draw a card out of the deck and you don't replace it, your probability goes from a total of 52. So you're drawing 1 out of 52, and then your probability of picking another card depends upon the first one because you're now seeing what's the probability of 1 over 51 because you're not replacing that card in the deck. So you now have different denominators, which means they're not mutually exclusive. That just means that this event, the second time you draw a card, depends upon the first event. If you replace that card, then they would be, it says the second, explain why the probability of picking draw in the, see, I didn't kind of cut off here. And the probability of picking a 7 on the second draw, I think that says are independent events. They're not independent because the second time you draw the card is going to depend on the first draw because you're not putting the card back. All right. Okay, this guy right here, this is Pythagorean Theorem. You know what I mean? Like, look at the square WXYZ on the coordinate plane. What is the perimeter of the square? So in order to find the perimeter, we got to figure out what the length of this side is. And you can't just look at it. All right. In geometry, you never go by what it looks like. You're always going to go by what you can prove. And it looks like you've done this here. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. You're going to use the Pythagorean Theorem to figure out this side length here. And in this case, 4 squared plus 5 squared is going to give you, what is that, 25 plus 16, which is 41. And we're looking at the square root of 41. That's this side length right here. So if we were going to find the area, you do the square root of 41 squared, which would be 41. So the area would be 41, but it's asking for the perimeter. So you're going to say the square root of 41 plus the square root of 41 plus the square root of 41 plus the square root of 41. And if you add all those together, you're going to get something like 25.6. Because when you round the square root of 41 to the nearest tenth, you get 6.4. If you add that 4 times, you get 25.6. I mean, you could narrow it down from, it would be between A and B. Like without even picking up a pencil, I know that this side length right here is about 5 or 6 just by looking at it. You can't go based on what it looks like. You go based on what you can prove. But however, I could get rid of C and D right there without even picking up my pencil because I know that this is not greater than 6. And 6 squared would give, 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6. That's going to give you a number that's greater than 32. So, it's not going to be C or D. It's got to be closer to 20 or 25 to get you the perimeter of that square. All right. The equation in line that is perpendicular to y equals 1/2 x minus 6. So if you were to do just what I call a quick sketch, you're crossing the y-axis at -6 and you're increasing by 1/2. So it's going to look like this. Well, it's got to go through the point 6, 4. So that would be 6, 4, which would be right here. And it's going to be perpendicular. So it is going to cross at a right angle. Which is the best guess here? Well, this line is decreasing. It's going down. So we know it's, okay, all of the slopes are negative. It's definitely not crossing at +1. This line here is not going to be crossing at +1. It's definitely not crossing at -8. It's either between C or B or D. How you're going to figure this out is when you are doing a line perpendicular, if the slope is 1/2, you're going to do the inverse of 1/2. So you just flip it upside down and be 2 over 1, which is 2, but you got to change the sign of it because it's going to be negative. So it would be negative 2. So your best guess here would be D. And if you look at it, I mean, that's the best guess. 7 would be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This line is not crossing at 7. It's crossing all the way at positive 16, and it's a negative slope. It's decreasing by 2. So if you do a really quick sketch, that's one way of doing it. Or you could just look at it and say, all right, if the slope is 1/2 x, the inverse of 1/2 would be 2 over 1, and then you change the sign. All right, so let's just say, for instance, if you had a slope of 4 and you wanted to find the line that's perpendicular to that, if it said y equals 4x minus 3, the inverse of 4 over 1 would be 1 over 4, and you change the sign of it, so it would be negative. All right, so you're just going to flip it upside down, change the sign. 17. What is the coordinate of point P that lies along the directed line segment from Q? Okay, so this is a pretty tough question. I mean, I'm sure there is a way to answer this one algebraically. I'm going to answer this question without even picking up my pencil, really. All right, because you're going to want to answer some of these questions as fast as you can, so you can spend time on the proofs or spend time on the questions that you know are going to take you a little bit longer. So you don't necessarily, I mean, you're going to have to calculate. So let's just use this graph up here, and we're going to plot these 2 points. So, you know, I would find a graph somewhere in the test, and I would plot those 2 points, 2, 5, and 7, 12. So 2, 5 would be here, and then 7, 12 is going to be way off of our graph. So I'm going to use this graph here, and as you see, I've already put those 2 points right here. So here's our line segment. So we're looking for where could we put a point on this segment that would make it a ratio of 3 to 2. So, you know, one side or one part of the segment is going to be 3 times, like it would be a ratio of 3 to 2. So it's going to be 3, whereas the other one would be 2. And we're not talking about like inches, we're talking about units. So if we were talking about inches, it would be 3 inches to 2 inches, or if we were talking about feet, it'd be 3 feet to 2 feet. So let's just narrow down the ones we know is not correct answer. This says 3, 4.2. Well, the point 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4.2 would be right here. That's not even a point on the line. You know, like, you know it's not A. So get rid of that one. That's not even a point on that line. The next one says 4.5, 8.5. So we're going to go to 1, 2, 3, 4.5, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.5. So that one looks, that's on the line, you know, I mean, it looks pretty good. So I'm going to put a point right there, and we're going to see which one is the best answer that we could get here. So that one looks like it's good so far because it's, at least it's a point on the line. This guy here, 5, 9.2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 0.2. So that looks like it's a point on the line also, and it actually looks like it's a little bit better because here you have the length of the segment, and then this one you have the length of the segment. So it looks like it's a ratio of 3 to 2, whereas the first one looks like it's about halfway. It looks like it's about the midpoint of that segment. So right now the best answer would be C. 5, 7 is not even a point on that line. So if your best answer is C, that's the one you're going to want to go with. I'm going to stop this video because it's going to take a while to upload. So I'll be right back.